Alastair Newton, Senior Political Analyst with Nomura. He joins us live. Alastair, welcome to India. What brings you to Mumbai?
The elections.
The elections.
That's what it's all about now. A few client meetings as well, of course. I mean, India is a very important market for Nomura. But the story today really is about the Indian elections. And until such time as we get clarity out of that, I think we're going to see markets basically doing what you guys have been talking about for the last few minutes, which is just moving a little bit. But if we think back to Q4 of last year, we saw a big movement on India. And there were three reasons for that, in my view. The first, clearly, was that tapering was put off, and we should be not underestimating that factor. The second was the man you've just had on the television, Dr. Rajan. The RBI did a really great job at a very difficult time last summer, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. The third was the markets outside India woke up to the fact that there's a general election coming up in May, and they saw Narendra Modi and said, that man looks like he's going to win the election, and from a market perspective, certainly for investors outside India, that is widely seen as being a significant positive.
So, Alastair, I want to come to your report, issues that keep you awake at night. What is it that keeps you awake at night and gives you sleepless nights when it comes to markets like India? Is it only the elections, and is that the core of all the problems right now?
Well, we're living in a world now where a lot of those big systemic political risks we were focused on 2 years ago have basically melted away. Obviously, we still have issues around oil in the Middle East, but with the Iran talks moving forward, even that's on a back burner for the time being. So we're looking at country-specific risk mainly this year. And of course, that means elections. And India is not the only big important emerging market with elections. We also have Brazil, Indonesia, South Africa and Turkey. But I think right now, the one which is exercising markets the most is actually India, because of the possibility that as markets see it, we're going to get a result which is going to be business friendly. Now, of course, there's a lot of uncertainty around that outcome. We have the insurgent AAP in Delhi attracting a lot of attention outside of India. I think an increasing amount of attention inside India too, and not always positive media coverage today. But the story in many respects outside India is about Narendra Modi. And I think the really interesting thing about his approach to this election is that he's turning it into an election which is about Modi. It's almost as if he's fighting a presidential campaign. And it's going to be very interesting to see if through that tactic he can reverse the long-term trend in Indian politics, which is for the share of the vote of the two big parties, INC and BJP, to go down over time. Bear in mind, too, that he also stands to profit from another long-term trend in Indian politics, which is anti-incumbency. And I think some commentators have perhaps read too much into the regional elections last November, December, and said, you know, great for BJP, for sure, but how much of the outcome of those elections was actually an anti-incumbent vote rather than a pro-BJP vote? So I don't think talk of a possible third-party-led coalition is necessarily overstated, but you know, I just can't see it happening. I do think that this election is in many respects BJP's to lose. And the big question is how big a plurality are they going to manage to win? Now,
so I just want to come to the point that you were probing about in your report as well. Does AAP have the potential to go national, and would it really challenge BJP's monopoly at this juncture?
These insurgent parties, we shouldn't underestimate their ability to drum up popular support on a wide basis. It's not just an Indian phenomenon. If we think about the Tea Party in America, admittedly part of a Republican party, but still drumming up a lot of support across the country. If we think about the upcoming European parliamentary elections and these insurgent parties, anti-European insurgent parties, which are going to do well in those elections, it's a very common phenomenon. So yes, I think we need to be very wary of them, but I would suggest that actually maybe they shouldn't have taken over the governorship of Delhi, because when you get into government, people expect things.
Yeah, they were better off in the opposition,
well,
right?
Sometimes these groups are better off in opposition. That's going to be a controversial view, and I guess we're probably going to get some comment coming back to Nomura for it. But, you know, they've exposed themselves to can they govern or not, and there will be questions asked. So far, you know, it's a mixed bag. In Delhi yesterday, I heard a lot of people saying, you've got to give them a chance. And I think that's right. And certainly for a lot of voters in Delhi, they are doing good things on anti-corruption and so on. It's not clear that they're going to better translate that into a nationwide surge, especially not with Modi campaigning really actively, big rallies, including in the areas of the country where BJP has traditionally been weakest, i.e. the east and the south. If he can deliver votes out of those areas as well, in India's first-past-the-post system, then I think we've got seriously to be wondering whether we're actually underestimating the share of the vote which the NDA collectively could get. I think most people are thinking maybe 190, 200 seats.
What's your number?
I'm not going to move too far from 190 to 200 for the moment, but I am seriously wondering whether the upside is maybe 230 to 240 for NDA, not for BJP, but for NDA, with BJP itself getting 190 to 200. Now, I think markets would take a 230 to 240 outcome very positively indeed.
So let's connect politics and portfolios. What are you telling your clients? How should they prepare their portfolio? Because like you said, event will be a binary event. 10% up or 10% down?
Well, that's not entirely clear. I didn't say that, actually. You're putting words into my mouth there. The first thing I would say is this. I think going back to what I was saying earlier about Q4, I think to a large extent, a Modi BJP victory government has already been priced in.
It's priced in.
Oh, yeah?
I think it was largely priced in by investors outside India in Q4 of last year when we saw the significant uptick in the Bombay Stock Exchange and a good recovery in the rupee. So I think basically most of your investors outside India are saying, we think Modi is going to win this election and we have already positioned ourselves accordingly. So the big question is, how big is the plurality going to be? How stable is the new government going to look? And at this stage, I think it's too soon to tell. If we get that 230, 240 result I'm talking about, I think markets are going to see that as a positive. But, you know, no disrespect to the people who do them. Opinion polling in India is very, very difficult indeed. It's a big country. No disrespect again, but the polls probably do tend to have an urban bias, which probably favours BJP, in my view. So I think markets are going to sit where they are for the time being, look at what's going on, see what the outcome is, and, you know, the election will start and 5 weeks later we get an outcome. It's a long, drawn-out process. And then weigh up what that means in terms of coalition building, because, let's face it, it's very unlikely that NDA is going to get an outright 272.
So, Alastair, I remember you too were watching our sister channel's interview, Rahul Gandhi's interview that is on our sister channel. So clearly no Rahul magic, nothing's going to work?
Well, 2009 was a remarkable result. It was a remarkable result for two people, Manmohan Singh and Rahul Gandhi. And we shouldn't underestimate the important part which Rahul Gandhi played in securing a much bigger Congress win than anybody had expected. Indeed, if I think back to 2009, I can remember having some fairly heated arguments with people here in Mumbai who thought that BJP was going to win in 2009.
I remember that, yeah.
I think on air, actually, with you guys at the time. But, you know, there's a lot to do. After 10 years in government, after all the problems which the current government has encountered, going back to the 2G scandal, basically they've been mired in issues. I get a sense, a very strong sense, that a lot of Indian voters feel it's time for a change. So the question really, I think, is not whether Rahul Gandhi can produce another miracle, but whether Modi can turn that sense of time for a change into votes for the BJP.
So I'm just going to split the entire, issues which currently are plaguing the UPA too. First is corruption. Second is what is happening to economic growth, and third is regional. AAP is addressing corruption, Modi is addressing economic growth, but there's the regional card, and which I think the third front would like to address. Can they be the party pooper?
They can, but that's if you consider the way in which Modi is campaigning very strongly across India. If you look at the fact that BJP is trying to build coalitions in advance of the election with regional allies, clearly they're aware of the threat. Yeah. Now, whether they can negate it or not, of course, is the $64,000 question. And as I say, right now there are uncertainties both ways in this election. If we don't get a BJP government, markets are going to be very disappointed. There's no question about that whatsoever.
10% down? 15% down?
I'm not a market strategist. I'm going to leave that to you experts.
Bottomless pit is a bigger worry.
So we'll see what happens around that. But I have to say that I'm pretty positive about my call on this at this stage. Now, we've still got 4 months to go before the election, of course. 3 months, I guess. We'll see what the date is. So a lot can change in that time. And clearly, Congress will continue to make efforts to try to bolster its vote, both in the campaigning, but also in the Lok Sabha. We have this minimum wage bill coming up that may well influence quite a few people, even though it's very unlikely to get passed into law before the election. Perfectly legitimate pre-election tactic. I'm not criticising Congress for trying to push that through. And we have seen in the past that Congress has turned around difficult elections and done better than we would have expected. But I have to say, I think they're going to struggle this time.
4 months is a long time, and UPA2 is still the ruling party. So I'm sure they will have some plans, how to really dole out some election goodies, whether it is increase in the wages, whether it is doling out some more welfare schemes. Do you think that could spoil the party? Because what will attract Aam Aadmi is the money.
Yeah. I think they've probably about run out of steam, to be honest. And, having said that, it's budget time coming up. I have a very high regard for Finance Minister Chidambaram. I think he's been a very solid finance minister. He's consistently tried to push forward the structural reform agenda, not only in this term as finance minister, but back pre-2009 as well. So maybe the budget, they will manage to pull some rabbits out of the hat. But I think it's going to be difficult from here on. Especially with Narendra Modi campaigning as hard as he is. He's out there working the stump really, really hard. And as I said earlier, a lot of big rallies, some surprisingly big rallies in parts of the country where you wouldn't necessarily expect him to be pulling in the big crowds, Bihar, for example.
So you're saying at 6,100 the market has peaked out for the FIIs. You're saying a BJP victory and a massive one at that is already in the price.
No. Sorry, you're putting words into my mouth again, Aisha. I'm not saying a massive BJP victory. I think something like 190 to 200 for NDA is priced in. We get something bigger than that, I think markets will see it as a positive.
But 150, if NDA is 150, markets come down.
150, it's not clear that Modi would be able to form a government at 150.
Yeah.
Elections are always important for India, and we've seen evidence of that in 2004, 2009. But 6 months after the election...
99 as well. You're too young to remember that, I'm not.
I remember reading some papers. I went online, and everything's available online.
Yeah.
But, 6 months after the election, it's normally the economics which take over. Market gave UPA2 a double thumbs up. Markets were up 10%. Now the same market is breathing a sigh of relief that UPA2 could go. Do you think election could be a 3-month event, but eventually it's the economics which will take over?
I think we need to be realistic about what any government is going to be able to do in terms of structural reforms and so on. It's always a struggle, not just in India, but in any country. We've only got to look how Europe is struggling with structural reform at the moment. We've only got to look at how Indonesia, closer to home with elections coming up, is struggling with structural reform. Brazil, it's a common story. I would say that a good, solid BJP-led coalition has probably 6 to 12 months. Where it will be able to push through reforms, investment in infrastructure, and so on. But Indian politics is very fractious. Even with a large NDA plurality, it's still going to be coalition. It's still going to be quite messy. And things will start to get more difficult. And it's also possible that an NDA-led coalition, BJP-led coalition, will be doing things which markets won't like. There are some issues over BJP's relationships with the RBI, for example. And I'm going to say this very clearly because I think this is really important. 2 weeks ago, we saw 2 central banks raise rates. The RBI went up 25 basis points on the repo rate. Markets said, wow, RBI, fantastic, doing what needs to be done, totally convinced, applause, independent central bank working well. Almost simultaneously, the Turkish central bank did a big rate rise, took markets by surprise, and markets said, don't believe you, go away, do more. Because there are question marks over the independence of the Turkish central bank in markets' minds today. any Indian government needs to be very, very careful, in my view, to protect one of India's most precious assets in terms of market credibility, which is your central bank.
Okay, so just to have a follow-up question, you say Modi is good for the market. Let me give you some example of what Modi or what the BJP has criticized. They are against FDI and retail. They have gone and supported welfare schemes, and they are the same government which really voted for the food security bill. Against FDI retail, and markets are happy about it?
Again, with all due respect, you're putting words into my mouth.
I'm just asking
what
a
I said
question.
was markets are happy about the idea of BJP. I didn't say that BJP are unreservedly market friendly. I think there are question marks there. And I agree with you. I was discussing in Delhi only yesterday with some of my friends there I think the very important nature of this retail sector business symbolically outside India. It gets a lot of publicity.
Exactly.
And the Walmarts of this world have come here. They formed a friendly alliance with an Indian company, and then they've gone into a friendly divorce because they've not been able to move issues forward. Retail is huge, and we have been, Rob Subaraman, Sonal Varma, my colleagues and I have been flagging this retail issue for 7 years now, and saying not only is it important in terms of actual retail per se, but it's also extremely important in terms of supply chain. And we all know at the moment that something over 30% of all the farm product in India does not get to market because of supply chain issues. The big retail organisations can sort that out. And any Indian government needs to think very, very seriously indeed about addressing this retail question and getting it sorted, because it is a millstone round the neck of urban India, Indian consumers and Indian farmers, because they're not getting the true value for their product today.
Alastair, I want to quickly talk about the US debt ceiling issue, which clearly is still unresolved. What's the sense that you're getting right now?
Looks much better this morning.
Yes, this morning it looks a little bit better. But could it turn out to be a systemic risk if it's completely unresolved?
Well, first of all, I think it's going to be resolved. The House passed the bill last night. It's a clean version. The strange thing is that we have a snowstorm to thank for this sudden move, because bad weather in the US and the fact that we're coming up to a congressional recess, and the Congress doesn't come back until 2 days before the Treasury's deadline, has kind of moved things forward. And I do get the sense that the Senate is actually going to act on it today. So we may well see this resolved before Congress goes into recess. If we do get across the 27th of February without final agreement, the question I would ask you and your viewers, and it's rhetorical to an extent, is this: had we woken up on the 18th of October after the last deadline and found that there still hadn't been a deal, would we have seen a big sell-off, or would markets have said, well, actually the real deadline is the 1st of November when the next social security checks go out, or indeed the 15th of November when the next big bond redemption payments were due? I don't want to know the answer to that question, because I don't want anybody to test the thesis. But my sense is that markets would probably deal with us getting across the 27th of February, provided they could see a fairly clear pathway to a resolution. Now, if they couldn't, there would be a sell-off. And let's be in no doubt whatsoever, a 7 or 8 percentage point sell-off in the S&P would get politicians to act. Think back to 2008 and Congress's initial rejection of the TARP package. The S&P went bang. Congress said, whoops, better do something. So I'm not too concerned about this, except in the sense is we keep going around this track, and sooner or later, maybe the Tea Party is just going to say, OK, markets don't move that much when we push this envelope. Let's try and push it a bit further, but probably not this time.